Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Divorced Woman's Guide podcast. I am so happy that you have decided to tune in today because I am here and joined by Karen Bonnell. Hello, Karen. How are you?
Wendy, I'm so glad to be here and joining divorced women who are, interested in being the best, even under the most difficult, sometimes most difficult circumstances.
Absolutely. And I am so excited for us to jump into our conversation today. Just so our audience knows, Karen has over 30 years of experience working with couples and families that are facing transition, loss, growth, and change. So Karen and I are going to talk today about co-parenting and how to create a child-centered parenting plan. Karen, I'm just going to dive into a little bit more of your background with our audience today, and then we will jump right in. So Karen is a graduate of the University of Michigan, go blue. And Karen has been
Blue.
Yes. Karen has been board certified and licensed as an advanced registered nurse practitioner since 1982 and served on the faculty of the University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan University, as well as Seattle Pacific University before beginning full-time practice in 1994. And Karen's work as a collaborative divorce coach spurred her determination to write the Co-Parenting Handbook with Kristen Little, who's a child specialist. Parents learn the best ways to support their children, strengthen their co-parenting, and discover the necessary tools to skillfully create a two-home family. I love that. Karen also created the Parenting Plan Workbook with contributor Felicia Malsby-Soleil to provide valuable access to the mechanics behind writing a strong child-centered parenting plan. And most recently, Karen and Patricia Papernow released the newest handbook for parents ready to date and hoping to one day successfully create a step family, which is called the Step Family Handbook, from dating to getting serious to forming a blended family. Her deep listening skills make all the difference working with co-parent pairs in conflict as they find their way through the pain of divorce into a future of optimism. Wow, so much richness and so much to talk about. And I have to tell our audience, it was a hard choice to figure out what I wanted to talk to Karen about. So we may have to make this a two-part interview series. But what we are going to talk about today, as I said before, is really about co-parenting and creating a really strong parenting plan where you really are putting your children in the center instead of the middle. What I would really love to start out doing, Karen, because I love definitions. I love just getting clear and making sure that there's a ghost. It's my dog. He's of course walking in during the middle of our interview. For those of you listening, the door just opened to my office and it was a little spooky for a second there. But I really love talking about definitions and just making sure that everybody's on the same playing field. So before we jump in, I would love for you to define what co-parenting actually means.
I'm so glad that you asked that because I agree. It's really important that the terms that we're using make sense to us. So here's the short version. Parents are two people who decide to have or adopt a child and be responsible for the raising of that kiddo together. Those are parents. And parents, when they separate and divorce and decide to have a parenting plan and they're going to live across two homes, they become co-parents. And co-parenting, well, let me just say one more thing. So then co-parents, if they recouple, the person they bring into that family system is in a step parent like role as opposed to a co-parent. And sometimes there's confusion about that. So co-parents are legally responsible for the raising, caring, nurturing, and structuring, stewarding into adulthood their children that are legally theirs. And step parenting are parents who come in and join that family system and ideally over time become members of a co-parenting a parenting coalition. So that's kind of some of the definitions, but co-parenting is often confused as something that has to do with friendship or singing kumbaya together or something like that. And co-parenting is actually a set of skills. And it's a set of skills that parents do on behalf of their children, not necessarily on behalf of one another. And that's critical to understand.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you said that because I think that people think that co-parenting means that you have to get along. It means that it's a collaborative parenting effort when truly that's not what that means. So thank you for defining that. And I'm very big, as I said, even asking the question that it's really important that as parents really focus on putting the kids in the center instead of the middle and making decisions that are best for them. So, what is perhaps a first step that some of our listeners can start to take their first step into really? Instead of using their kids as a pawn or using them as a way to negotiate, what can they do to really take them out of the equation and think about what's best for them?
Right. So keep in mind that when you get married, you form a dyad. Usually, let's just talk in generalities here, but husband and wife and wife, husband and husband, whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
But you're together as an intimate partnership, oftentimes before children are on the scene. When we're separating and divorcing, what we're unpacking, what we're taking apart, bringing to a close is that intimate partnership. It's almost always there that the bulk of our conflict and enmity, our hurt, our betrayal, whatever the case may be, that's where that lives. What we want to do when we're going through separation and divorce is really to hold on to the fact that we're excellent parents. Children will survive having their families restructured without a lot of pain or damage or anything that impacts their adulthood as long as we remain good parents. And that's really what's crucial here. So, our co parenting relationship is the strengthening of a bond between us as parents, by the way, until death do us part. We didn't know that when we were doing our vows, but here it is. The intimate partnership can come to a close, and that's what separation and divorce is about. The parenting relationship needs to strengthen and become a strong co-parenting relationship. And that's what allows us, excuse me, that's what allows us to make sure kids stay in the center of our worlds, not caught in the middle, which is really harmful to children.
Yeah, I always say that it's better for our children to see that we're happier apart than really miserable or unhappy together. And I hear so many, and I was one of them. I mean, I was willing to try to work through a lot of our issues to stay with my kids, even though I knew it wasn't the best decision for me. And I hear that from so many of my clients because all of us are so terrified that we're actually going to, do long-term damage to them if we break apart our family. So, what I have learned and what I'd love for you to talk about is it's not that you're hurting your children by getting a divorce. What's hurting them is being in an environment that is unhealthy for them, right? So, talk a little bit about that because I know you and I, as we were prepping to talk about what we were going to discuss today, that you made the comment, what divorce breaks apart, skillful co-parenting builds. So talk a little bit about how that works.
Divorce is a restructuring of the family. It just simply means we're going to go from being a one home family to usually a two home family. And restructuring how a family is set up is not what's harmful to kids, but there are some things that really are harmful to children. And that is inadequate parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And this does not mean, by the way, parenting is not a competitive sport. So we don't always need to have the best parent be the only parent. What we need are two strong and engaged parents who are good enough parents. Kids do best when they have a strong and engaged relationship with each of their parents and adequate parenting. And that the other things that harm children are toxic conflict, right? Or parents who are emotionally not available. That's often what happens, Wendy, in a family where a marriage is unhealthy, is that parents become emotionally unavailable to their children and things just feel weird to kids. Like they're being physically cared for, but emotional presence is usually absent or they're struggling. So when we become a two-home family, we actually have an opportunity to be healthier. All of us have an opportunity to be healthier. The key is, do we seize that opportunity to strengthen ourselves, to make sure our parenting, we're in the saddle as good parents? And then if we're healthier, then of course we're also going to be happier. And so are our kids. They're going to be more relaxed. They're going to be less stress.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, it's interesting. My oldest son, who's now 14, he wanted to come into my private Facebook group, which is the divorce rehab, because he wanted to share with everybody in there how much better his life has been since his dad and I decided to divorce, because I see my dad and my dad's really happy, and I see my mom and my mom's really happy, and it's kind of cool that I have two houses, and he's painting this brighter side. And I know that there is research that backs this up. So I'd love for you to share some of that with our audience, as well as me, because I'm a numbers girl too.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm not a statistics girl, so you got the wrong gal for that. What I can say is social science research is really interesting, right? Because in order to do the research, and it takes many years to do it, and then by the time you compile the statistics and it comes out, it's actually sometimes outdated.
Right.
Okay. And so I just want to mention that it's about a 10-year window. So the research that we're looking at today is research that was actually done in the between 2000 and 2010, for example. What we do know, and is unequivocal, that the research bears is, again, a strong and engaged relationship with both parents, typically a shared schedule as long as there's adequate parenting and the parent is available to provide parenting. Shared schedule, what does that mean? Sometimes people go, is that 50-50? No, 50-50 is overrated. I'm not saying it's not important. And when it can happen, it's lovely for families. It feels balanced and parents both feel respected. But regardless of overnights, you're always a 100% parent, right? And so we really want to look at what is developmentally appropriate for children and what's going to make their lives smooth as they move back and forth between those two homes. And if that's week on, week off, or a 2-2-5-5, hallelujah. But if it's not, it can still be very much a shared schedule. As soon as we get right around 5 overnights for each parent every 2 weeks, we're in a shared schedule. The research is clear. That's when children feel like they have a home with each of their parents.
Mm.
Something that I almost always say to parents is, let's not say mom's house, dad's house, as if children don't have one now, little vagabonds kind of drifting back and forth between them. They have a home with mama and they have a home with dada. And that's what your son is saying. I have a home with my dad, and my dad and I have a stronger relationship today because it's not disrupted by what's going on for you guys. And goodness knows I have a home with you, mama, and that's not disrupted by the things that were going on between you two. So that's what we think about around research. We know that. We also know the single most destructive thing for kids is chronic toxic conflict. So if we drag all that intimate partnership unrest right into our two-home family, we're not making any gains, folks. We've got to be really committed to being skillful parents. And that, again, doesn't mean we need to be friends. We need to be civil. We need to be respectful. And we need to know what those skills and tasks are that make co-parenting effective across two homes.
Yeah, and I think you bring up, I mean, that's such great information. And you bring up an interesting point too, talking about like the custody arrangement and percent this and percent that. In my own divorce, I mean, we have 50-50 custody. However, it's flexible, right? Because at the end of the day, it's really about, sometimes I take an extra day, sometimes I'm asked for help, vice versa. And I don't think it's necessarily the percent of time that you're with a parent. It's really about its quality, not quantity. And at the same time, I think many times parents don't necessarily think about what type of schedule is best for the kids. It's about the fight between the parents, what they want, instead of really what is in our children's best interest. So how can our listeners really come to terms with and sort of wrap their minds around a schedule that is really in their kids' best interest, instead of trying to get even or wanting it to be even just for the sake of saying, like, I'm a good parent, I have them half the time?
Right. It comes back to that thing that parenting isn't a competitive sport, is it?
No, it is not.
Somehow, if I don't have 50%, then I'm somehow a less than parent.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with that. Two parents who are raising a child together across two homes are always 100% parents. Let's just get really clear about that.
Yeah.
Now, you're on duty at different times, and that percentage might be different. And of course it will be, because unfortunately we can't just clone our children and each get a full set, because I think most parents would want to do that. Over time, as you adjust, and Wendy, I'm sure you've spoken to this to your listeners, you actually recalibrate in a way that is very surprising. That when you're with your kids, you're really present with them, and you're attending their activities and their school things and this and that. When your kids are with their other parent, you're actually in a different part of your life that is rich and rewarding. And thank goodness, because you're probably also working and trying to maintain a home now as a solo parent, not a single parent, you're a solo parent, that you need that time. And so to be reassured that recalibration happens for everyone. It happens for the kids, it'll happen for your co-parent, it'll happen for you. So back to number one, developmentally appropriate. Let's make sure we're putting children on a schedule that matches their emotional and physical development. I had a set of parents walk in my office. They were so proud of themselves. They sat down and they announced, so we have a residential schedule already figured out. We have 3-year-old twins, and we have them on a week on, week off schedule. I did that. I just took a breath and I thought to myself, how on earth am I going to tell them that under no circumstances can 3-year-olds tolerate a full week away from a primary attachment relationship like a parent? They can't be whipsawing back and forth a full week from mama and then a full week from dada without that being incredibly emotionally distressing. So what they brought up next was, but you know what? The twins are really struggling at school. So we just slowly backed into talking about what are the emotional needs of 3-year-olds? What are the emotional needs of 5-year-olds? What age is a week on, week off schedule appropriate? I'm breastfeeding my 9-month-old. How on earth are we going to do a residential schedule? It's all doable, but you have to have the information. You have to know what you're doing. You need to work with someone who can guide how to create a two-home family that really respects secure attachment with both parents, right? And allows everybody to get their needs met, because I call it kind of families that are not just child-centered. And that's really critical. And again, if I'm working at Amazon from 7:30 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night during the week, I don't have any time to really parent my children. So you know what, Wendy, if they can be with you at that point during those times, that would be really helpful to our kids. And let's look at creating a schedule where I have other kinds of time with them.
Yeah.
Right? So those are the things that we think about.
Hey, it's Wendy here. I wanted to take a quick break from the conversation to say thank you for listening. If you're thinking about getting a divorce, in the middle of one, or on the other side, and are struggling with negative self-talk, noises in your head, and doubt in your heart, all while dreaming of peace and joy, we'd love to talk. Learn how the divorce rehab can help you reclaim your voice and identity to transform your life and realize your divorce is not happening to you, it is happening for you. Visit wendysterling.net to schedule a free divorce recovery call with me today. And now let's jump back into the conversation. It brings up two questions that I also have about that, because a lot of times we may set schedules with our co-parent and the children don't want to go to somebody's house. So how do we manage that? Do we give in? Do we stay firm and that other co-parent gets to have a relationship? So how do parents navigate those waters when the kids either have an opinion or don't want to go?
That's so great. So mostly we're talking about our middle and older teens who start to believe that their life is more important than family life, which is exactly, again, developmentally appropriate. When do your peers, your activities, your school become so much more important than what your parents are thinking about whether you're home for dinner or not? I remember when my son was in high school, he left by 7 in the morning, and if he was home by 7 at night, it was like a remarkable day. I might see him while I was awake.
Right.
And that's developmentally appropriate. And we want to really think about upping our flexibility with our teenagers, especially if we're starting a residential schedule with middle and older teens. With other children, when they're resisting transitions, it probably means we're not doing a very good job of preparing them for transitions, to be honest, or we're not working with their neurodiversity. Some children just genuinely have trouble transitioning from, one activity to the next, let alone one home to the next. And so really understanding what kids need around transitioning is very, very important. Transitions need to be calm, peaceful, loving, and nurturing. Shouldn't be discussing any adult information at a transition. That makes kids very, very anxious. We shouldn't be fighting. That makes kids even more anxious. We have to be really thoughtful about how do we do this and how do we prepare children for two-home family life. We don't just drop kick them into two-home family life. We help them build what I call emotional muscle, right? So we start out with a kind of residential schedule that's about getting used to two-home family life. But I'm going to say it's important for kids to have a strong and engaged relationship with both of their parents. And aligning with a 13-year-old girl who is temporarily pissed off at her mom and screaming in her face, I'm just going to go live with my dad and you can't do anything about it. Hold the phone, Dada. Hold the phone. You look at that 13-year-old girl and you say, honey, you are really mad at mama right now. And you're going to go right back to mama's and work this out because your mama loves you past the moon and back. We just don't buy into that alliance. It is harmful for kids to do that.
So it is, and I totally agree with you. And I'm even thinking about a couple of my clients who are also struggling with a parent who cares more about their life when their kids are there instead of really focusing on creating special time with their kids. So how can parents navigate? I know what I recommend, but I consider you to be an expert in this category. So how can parents manage that when the kids say, mom or dad doesn't pay attention to me, or when I go over there, they're worried about their own life, or we get dragged around? And how can the other parent support their children in those circumstances?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. We're not raising children who always need to be the center of the universe, even though we want them to be central to what we're doing. Depending on their age, there may be ways that we're coaching them to figure out how to positively and constructively adapt to something that's a little less than their optimal. So I want to be clear about that. Just because things aren't perfect and they might be more perfect with me, hello, no, we're not going there. The other thing is we're teaching our children how to be self-determined and how to be empowered, which is to say, how will you go back and talk to mom about the fact that you really wish Bud, the new boyfriend, wasn't there every weekend when you guys aren't in school, that you'd really like to some time with her? How are you going to talk to her about that? So there's many, many steps I would take with kids first in terms of them talking with their parent. The next thing is I would really encourage them to do some parent-teen mediation or parent-child mediation, child counselor. I might do some co-parent coaching to say, hey, I'm hearing from the kids over and over again that Bud is around a lot and it's really bothering them. And I know you'd want to know this because you care about how the kids feel. I know that, right? Which is very different than accusatory, right? What's wrong with you? You've got Bud over there all the time. The kids are all strung out. No, that's not how we approach someone who we know actually does love our kids, even if they're not being the most skillful co-parent in the world.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. And I've had to learn that shift in language myself with how it is that I speak with. And I think once you move out of anger, once you get out of the anger phase, it becomes a lot easier. It becomes a lot more authentic when you're speaking those words. And at the same time, what I always tell my clients is, in order for your kids to it's best that your kids have their eyes wide open when it comes to the other parent, and they get to be the one who creates and realizes that on their own. It puts you at a disadvantage if you're bad mouthing or agreeing with them. It's so detrimental to them. And instead, as I always say, we get to hold space for our children's feelings and really empower them to create their own relationship with their co-parent. And then if that's not working, as you said, you bring in a professional to help support the kids. This isn't about you attacking them. This is about, hey, I know you love them and I know you want what's best. And perhaps they're not aware, right?
Right. Right?
So I think that that's great advice that you just shared. And I love the language you just used as well. I would love to ask you as we're wrapping this up. Again, I feel like we could talk for 2 hours about co-parenting because there's so
I,
many
I usually
struggles.
say I usually say an entire weekend, but
Yeah.
2 hours, whatever.
I mean, I feel like we could talk even longer than a full weekend, but what is some final advice that you would like to leave our audience with today before we end our conversation?
Co-parenting is something you do regardless of whether it's reciprocated. And what I mean by that is if you happen to have a co-parent who is extremely difficult or compromised in some way, maybe they struggle with addictions, maybe they they're compulsive daters and they can't let go of a new romantic partner. And you're like, oh my God, help me, please, Heavenly One. I want you to know you're still co-parenting. And how you refer to a child's parent, how you talk about that really matters to kids. This really matters. And all children want to believe that they are of parents who are worthy of peace, who are worthy of being loved, are worthy of being respected. And a little bit what Wendy was just saying, we don't need to fill in those gaps. The truth is overrated. Our adult truth about who a parent is not helpful to children. They will figure it out. And us showing up, you, Wendy, myself, showing up as good parents is the most important indemnification from any harm that our co-parent might be doing to our kids. We just need to show up as good parents. We need to be loving. We need to provide structure. There needs to be warmth. That the last thing they need from us is to criticize or disparage their other parent. That lives in their heart. We need to stay aware of that.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. I love what you just said. Thank you so much, Karen, for being my guest today and for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with my audience. I'm so appreciative.
My pleasure.
I would love for people to know how they can get in touch with you. And I also know that you have two, I believe, free gifts available as well. So I'll let you
Yeah,
share.
anybody who wants to go to my website, there are two free downloads. One is called Family Centered Parenting Planning, which is something that I did with an attorney, Elise Bowie. Please feel free to grab that. And at the end of that, in the appendix, are lots of examples of developmentally appropriate residential schedules. So that's often helpful to people. It also answers questions like what is parenting coordination and so all kinds of things like an FAQ. The other one is Sober Parenting Matters. And this is definitely a research document on the impact of addictions on children as they grow into adulthood. And why is it, especially in two-home family life when there's no backup, that we need sober parenting for our children? So both of those are available on the website. Coach, Mediate, Consult, it's all one word. You can Google Coach Karen Kirkland. Think Costco, because that's where I live, Kirkland, Washington, the flagship Costco store. And I will be the first thing that pops up. I welcome anybody to be in touch.
That's wonderful. And we will have all of your contact information in the show notes, everybody, so you can get in touch with Karen and please take advantage of those resources. Again, I'm going to say it again. The website is coachmediateconsult.com. And everybody, Karen, thank you again so incredibly much. I'm so grateful to know you and you're just wonderful. I hope to have you back on as a guest. Thank you.
Anytime. Everybody stay well. Happy holidays. Have a wonderful 2021.
Thank you. And everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed our podcast today. I know that I got some really great nuggets of information. Please share with me. I always love hearing from you guys. If there was something that resonated with you, please feel free to reach out, talk to me, tell me what it is that you thought. My email is wendy@wendysterling.net. Thank you all for tuning in today, and I'll see you guys on next week's episode. Sending you all love, light, and joy as always. Mwah. Bye, everybody.
Be well.